America's military is the foundation of its superpower status. Accounting for close to 40% of the world's total military budget, no nation spends anywhere near as much as the United States. For both Republican and Democrat politicians, the massive defense budget is a sacred cow, never subject to serious scrutiny. But more and more, the US military is being exposed for wasting billions of taxpayer dollars, acting as a slush fund for contractors, and being unable to complete its own projects. Now, the Trump administration is adding its own brand of chaos to the mix. Welcome to the politics of New America. On the show today, we explore the out-of-control money pit that is the American military. I'm your host, Nathan Stone, and with me is producer Josh Carmody.
Yeah, just scoop up all that cash, throw it in a pit with some tires, and there you go. Yeah, that's about as good as it gets.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, because you are our resident movie expert, which movie do you think does the best job at being pure American military propaganda? Is it a classic like Top Gun? Is it one of the Michael Bay like Transformers? You've seen just about every movie I can think of. So what do you think? What movie makes you think American military?
Both are pretty good. Both are rah America. Like, yeah, Top Gun is so aggressively an advertisement for the Air Force, or I guess the Navy, which has the second largest Air Force on the planet. But yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, Top Gun for sure. And then there is a bunch of Michael Bay stuff, especially the Transformers movies where the military has like agreed to work alongside, because you got stuff that's like very American centric, like Independence Day or Armageddon. But Independence Day feels like people cosplaying as the military. It does feel like a gay German's idea of the American military. There's something just a little off about it. And then you got other Michael Bay stuff like The Rock, where objectively the non-military guys are the ones who save the day. So Top Gun's definitely up there. It's so egregiously a commercial to the point that they had recruiters like at a table outside of screenings. So it's got to go to Top Gun.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So I think that absolutely pushes it over the line. It was the first thing I thought of when I thought of kind of the jingoistic celebration of America's military. For me, I see it most watching sports. I'm a fan of hockey and I'm a fan of American football. And both of those sports, and specifically football, are just littered with military flyovers, special military games where everyone on the sideline is wearing camo. It's unquestionably silly, but I feel like to a degree it's just a reflection of modern American culture, where the military is so much ingrained into what it means to be an American. And the reason why there's a few reasons I wanted to do this episode today, but the Trump administration is really kind of reshaping, especially the top levels of the military in its own image. And so I wanted to cover that a little bit, as well as just some of the missteps of the military that have been brewing for years that aren't really Trump administration necessarily, you can't really hold them accountable for it because it's been going on for, in some cases, decades. But because of the chaos of the Trump era, it's kind of coming to a head. So when we're thinking about the American military today, it's important to know that even though it has been the dominant global force for decades now, and I mean, at least had a challenger in the Soviet Union, but since the collapse of the Soviet Union has really been the unopposed supreme military in the world, now is being challenged by China. But this is a military that has really spiraled out of control spending wise in this century, right? So when you look at the year 2000, which I grant is a long time ago now, 25 years ago, the military budget was $320 billion, which again would make it today the second largest military in the world by spending. Today, it sits at a whopping $1.08 trillion after Trump's $150 billion boost that came a little bit earlier this year. So this is a military that in this century has basically doubled or more than doubled its budget, which is absolutely wild. Now, there has been a lot of things for the American military to do, and it has taken on a lot of, some would say, misadventures in that time. But even when you think about, okay, from 2000 to 2025, sure, 25 years, everything's gone up, inflation, whatever. Then you look at 2018. In 2018, the military budget was $682 billion. So now we're just looking at a 7-year gap. And from 7 years to jump over $300 billion is kind of absolutely incredible. And
it's not cheap subjugating the planet.
It sure isn't. It sure isn't. And starting off the show, I want to dispel one of the most popular arguments that conservatives will give to argue that the military spending is not out of control and is in fact necessary. And what you always get is percentage of GDP. Now, when you look at it as a percentage of GDP, you know, the American military in the 80s, for example, got all the way up to 6.81% of GDP in 1982. Back in the kind of Vietnam era, it was close to 10% of GDP, which is huge, ridiculous. Those budgets dwarfed by this 2025 budget. But when you look at it today, you know, it's around 3.3 odd percent. And that looks much more manageable. You're saying, well, it's 3% of GDP. We're never going to miss that. But that argument is a bad faith argument because it has the military budget and whether or not it's sustainable and affordable has nothing to do with GDP. The idea that it's 3% of GDP only becomes relevant if you are your GDP is growing and you are collecting more in taxes, in revenue, and that's not happening. So, give you an example, right? I gave you the stats from 2015 when it was the military budget was about 600 and some odd $billion. In that year, total federal revenue was $4.31 trillion. A lot of money, but you know, defense eats up a big portion of that. Since and at that time, GDP was 24.09 trillion. Well, last year, GDP had risen to over $28.83 trillion, right? Federal revenue had only risen to $4.92 trillion. And in fact, that was a good year. In 2023, it was just 4.57, which is just, 0.2 more than it was in 2015. And I'm sorry to throw all those numbers at you, but the moral of the story is it doesn't matter what percentage of your GDP your defense spending is if you're not bringing in revenue. And the United States is not bringing in more revenue than it was in 2015 at really, because the federal deficit is eating that difference. So you have federal revenues that are static or even smaller. And Trump's big, beautiful bill has just thrown a wrench in how much money the federal government will be bringing in. Also, he's gutted the IRS, the people who collect that revenue, the revenue service. So 2025 and going forward could see federal revenue fall precipitously. And it doesn't matter how big your GDP is, because you're spending over $1 trillion, right? So your revenue, say it gets to $5 trillion. If you're spending over $1 trillion on defense alone, and it's only your third or fourth biggest line item, because you're still spending more on servicing your debt, you're still spending more on Social Security. This is utterly unsustainable for the United States. And it's not even clear that Americans are getting anywhere near the value for their tax dollars spent on the military, right? So we're going into debt to field this huge fighting force, the largest the world's ever seen, spending $1 trillion on it. Last year, the Department of Defense was audited. They're audited every year since 2018. Why they weren't audited before 2018, who can say? Maybe they just never got around to it. But they've been audited.
It was the war on terror. Look, they had to cut him a blank check. There's nothing but before 9/11 and after 9/11.
I mean,
all
it
that
might
matters.
as well be. Yeah. God, yeah.
If it's not the birth of Christ, it's 9/11. The two most important events in history.
It's the only things I mark on my calendar every year. I mean, that and Halloween. But the Department of Defense has been audited 7 times. Out of those 7 audits for the last 7 years, they have passed 0 of them. In 2024, so last year's audit, they were unable to account for more than half of their assets. That is, the Department of Defense, with assets like aircraft carriers and tanks and missiles. Hopefully, those weren't the assets they couldn't account for. Hopefully, it was more like office supplies, but I don't know. This is billions and billions of taxpayer dollars simply vanishing into the ether. Now, over these years, and especially like 2020 to 2024, there was a study done by the Watson School of International and Public Affairs about the beneficiaries of Pentagon spending. So who's actually getting all of this money? Well, for most of this discretionary income, military contractors are getting that money, right? So a lot of it does go to paying the troops and driving the tanks and flying the planes. But 54% of the Pentagon's discretionary spending, which equaled $4.4 trillion over the 2020 to 2024, went to military contractors. So the big winners were 5 firms: Lockheed Martin at about $313 billion, RTX, which was formerly Raytheon, $145 billion, Boeing, great company, unless you need doors on your airplanes, $115 billion, General Dynamics, $116 billion, and the Northrop Grumman Group, $81 billion.
What a list of usual suspects.
I know, right?
What an absolute bucket of greasebags.
Yeah. So, and just to throw in just a little bit of a comparison here, the total diplomacy, development, and humanitarian aid budget, excluding military aid, during this time frame, these 4 years, was $356 billion. So, a little bit more than they paid Lockheed Martin over that time. Now, U.S. military spending has always been contractor heavy. This is capitalism, after all. We're not going to produce things ourselves. That would make us communists. But it has grown significantly. So in the 1990s, about 41% of military spending went to contractors, which is still a huge amount, but it has grown by about 14% since that time. And it's the type of thing that because so much of it is kind of wrapped in secrecy of national security and weapons development, that kind of thing, we don't have a good idea of what kind of efficiency this money that they're throwing, these billions and billions of dollars to these companies, what it is getting taxpayers, right? Every now and then, of course, there's new developments, there's new types of planes, that kind of thing. But when you're spending $1 trillion a year, and going forward, this budget seems to only be getting bigger and bigger, we just really don't know where it's going, except that these defense contractors are making out like bandits. And then the things that they produce, half of them are going missing, and the Pentagon can't account for them. Now, in the Pentagon's defense, it does have assets in all 50 states, plus I believe it was 4,500 sites worldwide. Maybe they could consolidate a few of those. I don't know. I'm not a budgeting expert, but I feel like that's something they might want to think about. Yeah, so that's just getting us warmed up, right? There's so much waste built into this system. Now I want to kind of layer this. The Trump administration, right? All of this was a problem before the Trump administration, and likely will be a problem after the Trump administration, should we see the end of the Trump administration.
But they cut Medicaid. They can just take all that healthcare money and dump that into the military, and then we're good for a little bit. If we stop paying for Social Security, that'll be even better.
That
would we get to put that money in there too.
Yeah,
just piss it all down the drain.
Ending Social Security would be the ultimate win condition for hardcore Republicans in Washington. Social Security is by far the biggest line item, and the unfortunate thing for them is that Social Security is about the one sacred cow that I think even Republicans fear to tread on, or fear to touch, and mostly just because it is so widely used among people who vote, and what I mean by that is old people, that it might just destroy them electorally forever. And I think it's about the one thing that they still fear is Social Security. Otherwise, I think there is almost nothing they wouldn't be willing to cut. It's funny though, when I talk about all this waste and all of these things gone missing in the Department of Defense, it's almost like there should be some kind of government efficiency department that could come in and really crack open the books and just tear apart that budget. But for some reason, I don't know, they must be busy doing something else. I don't know. It's a shame. But yeah, let's move on to some of our interesting developments in the Trump era. And I want to start with something that just kind of came out July 28th. Whiskey Pete over in the Pentagon, he's got a new directive, and that is that Pentagon staff and Department of Defense staff aren't allowed to attend or communicate with a number of military and defense think tanks, and they're banning them, and they're pulling all of the funds from these think tanks. And so it's very unusual that they do this, because think tanks like this, these are not liberal institutions. These are military think tanks, for Christ's sakes, people. Like, this is not, it's not a bunch of commies sitting around dreaming of world peace through, one government. One of the recent, I believe it was the Aspen, there was a meeting in Aspen, and the think tank there featured Condoleezza Rice no famed liberal, and but that wasn't enough for the Pentagon and for Hegseth, and so they declined to show up. And I find this all very funny, but the actual repercussions of this are that it's kind of a bit of a brain drain for the Pentagon and for the military, because a lot of people, especially military staff and higher up military staff, when they are done their careers, they join these types of think tanks, and they write papers on what America should do to counter China's rising influence on the Pacific and stuff like that. But it speaks to a wider isolationism that has crept into military policy. And we saw this early on with all the NATO skepticism that was coming out of the White House. And we see it now with this, because the reasoning given to us is that there was a suggestion within internal reviews in the Department of Defense that some think tanks were shaping the Pentagon strategies in ways that could benefit foreign actors or defense contractors funding their research. And to that, it's like, yeah, duh. I mean, that's true. It's 100% true.
Yeah.
But this isn't a thing you've ever had a problem with before. You love defense contractors. I just told you spend most of your money on defense contractors. So it's a really odd it's a really odd thing to do, and Trump's national security and defense strategy has been in a very odd place. I don't think it's ever really found its footing, and maybe that's partially Hegseth, and he's got a very, let's say, unique view on politics and where the military should be. The military in the United States is set up to be apolitical. It's not supposed to be a tool for politicians. It's supposed to be there to defend the Constitution, as well as be the military and do military things. And now, of course, it's always been a bit of a political tool, especially, elections where politicians are accused of either being, they're soft on whoever the enemy of the day is, whether that's terrorists or Russia or China. And it's always been a organization that has been politicized, but not necessarily from within, which is what we're seeing with Hegseth and the Trump administration. And of course, the biggest way that they're doing that is by replacing the top brass, which we will talk about in a second here. But there's some real impacts here with these think tanks being pushed out. They play a key role in wargaming, strategy development, and technological kind of both innovations and ideations, right? So kind of coming up with new ideas like, the Army could really use, if they had this kind of device, it'd be really good. And then, one of their defense contractor buddies goes like, we could probably build something like that.
Someone get Howard Hughes. We need a jetpack.
It's caused, this whole thing has caused a lot of confusion and pushback. And a lot of critics are saying this could harm national security research, while others are saying it was done to kind of curb influence of foreign entities, especially kind of Gulf states. That was kind of bandied about, but it's really, really it's kind of the latest in a series of odd moves. The biggest ones, though, are the firings. Now, this is a little bit old. It's from February, but we haven't talked about it on the show because we haven't done military, and I wanted to kind of add this to the narrative that I'm pushing here of things not being all right within the American military. And so back in February, Trump fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was Air Force General C.Q. Brown, and pushed out 5 other admirals and generals. Now, he replaced Brown, who was the head of the Air Force. He also replaced the head of the Navy, who was Admiral Lisa Franchetti. She was the first woman to lead a military service, and as we'll see, that's a bit of a sticking point with the Trump administration.
Oh, we can't have that.
No. So he also removed the Judge Advocate General for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The advocates. So that's multiple. That's 3 people. And all I really know about the Judge Advocate Generals was that show from, I think, the 90s and early aughts.
Oh, Jag?
Yeah.
Yeah. The show that keeps used to keep old people company in the afternoon.
I knew it must serve some purpose. I don't think I ever watched it myself. Those were really unprecedented firings. You don't get rid of that much experience in kind of one fell swoop, generally. This had more of kind of a top-level brass purge theme to it than necessarily that these people had done anything that would normally result in them losing their positions. Part of it, of course, came with the big anti-DEI push. So C.Q. Brown, the Air Force head of the Air Force, was black. Lisa Franchetti, a woman. So there was a bit of a theme to this, and it was seen by, it was claimed by critics to be kind of like there was a political loyalty test kind of thing going on there that they must have failed. Now, to be fair to Trump in this, he did say that he was going to fire woke generals in his campaigning. He blamed them for the troubled 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was famously an absolute disaster. So, and he did this too without immediately having replacements picked. So it did take them some time. So again, it kind of just adds to this idea of things are less organized and a little bit more chaotic now. Charles Brown, or C.Q. Brown, had over 40 years of service when he was let go. Now, Pete Hegseth had been critical of Brown even before he became defense secretary, and he's been working with kind of this broad agenda around eliminating DEI initiatives in the military, but also seemingly removing any kind of diverse officer.
I'm still hung up on woke generals, like, especially to take a guy whose 40-year military experience spans the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the War on Terror, and then all of the War on Terror, is crazy. Yeah, real woke general. Oh, they're letting the troops kiss each other. God damn it.
Yeah. So Hegseth, and to be fair, I have not read this, but he did write a book in 2024, The War on Warriors, Behind the Betrayal of the Men Who Keep Us Free. And in that book, he went after Brown, and wondering if his promotion to chief of the Air Force was, and quoting now, was it because of his skin color or his skill? We'll never know, but always doubt. Which on the face of it seems unfair to CQ, but since he has made the race card one of his biggest calling cards, it doesn't really much matter. So this was Hegseth before he became the defense secretary on this. So yeah, it doesn't surprise necessarily, only in, I guess, how little second thought came into it once he was defense secretary about getting rid of uh, you know, people with rare experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what you think, and I have absolutely no opinion on CQ Brown, if he was a good Air Force chief or a bad Air Force chief. I have no way of knowing that. But the idea that he is a 40-year veteran, and again, like you said, has served since kind of the end of the Cold War, would tell me that he is going to have valuable experience to offer, much more so than maybe Pete Hegseth. But that is, that is, I guess, his prerogative and not mine.
And I'd say if anyone's playing the race card, it's the Trump administration. They really threw the Uno reverse down on the Trump the race card. They're the ones who always bring it up.
Yeah. They do seem a lot more obsessed with it than anyone else is. Oh, I almost forgot too. On his very first day in office, Trump fired Admiral Linda Fagan as head of the U.S. Coast Guard, and she had been its first female commanding officer as well. So again, that theme. A little bit later this year in May, Hegseth ordered the active duty military to cut 20% of its 4-star general officers. So this is another one that just kind of speaks to a bit of a purge of the top brass, right? And we've seen this throughout the federal government. What's incredible, though, is that the military is not an organization where you necessarily just want to install toadies and people who are loyal politically. You kind of want, if anything calls for a meritocracy, it's probably the military. And it's usually a bad sign when you're cutting and firing military officers based purely on politics. But this also seems to have a little bit of that, efficiency ring to it, right? Where it's just like, oh, we're too top heavy, right? And we need to slim down and become more efficient. But that's an argument that doesn't really fly when you're not doing it anywhere else in this $1 trillion military. Specifically just at the tippy top. Now, the way the American military works, when I say, if you're not familiar, when I say 4-star generals, there's a lot of generals in the United States military. So much so that it actually surprised me. There's about 800 general officers in the military. And that's an insane amount of generals. I feel like there's like 3 in the Canadian military. It's I was stunned when I heard that stat.
Well, if we spent more on our military, maybe we could have more generals too.
That's true. I'm all for just making everyone a general. Think about it. Who's going to fight? Who's, if Russia, comes over the Arctic Circle and we're there and we're just like, no, we got 60,000 generals. All of our guys are general level. And they'll be terrified of that. They'll be like, oh man, these guys.
How can you fight a military so confused because everyone can give all the orders? Yeah. Just scattered.
This is why I do not get tapped for my brilliant military tactics.
If only they would go back to that. What was that, like Roman style? They'd like pick somebody for like their civic duty was to like lead the city or lead the government because they were at a time of war.
Yeah, the tremendous amount of generals in the United States military. Only 44 are 4-star generals. So basically, each star you have as a general denotes a level of seniority. So there's first star. 4-star, I believe, is the tippy top. It's as many stars as they're willing to give you, I believe.
Don't say that too loud. If Trump hears that, he's gonna be like, "We're gonna come up with super 4-star generals. We got the super master system 4-star general,
5-star Michelin generals.
Yeah.
So
the stars are gold. Don't worry."
yeah. So from a perspective of actual numbers, right? 10 to 20% of or 20% of these is like, I think, 8 odd officers, 8 generals. It's still a loss of a lot of experience, but it's clearly not a cost saving procedure, right? It's clearly done for other reasons. Probably in this case political, because you've probably already identified the officers that don't fit with your ideology and want them to be removed. So another funny thing about this, and by funny I mean points to the degradation of the American political system, is that the number of general officer positions in the military is actually set by law, and by Congress, not by Pete Hegseth or the Trump administration. And Congress were not provided with advance notification that they would normally receive on the cuts.
You don't say.
Yeah, Congress just being completely irrelevant, as it usually is on this show, unfortunately. So things aren't great at the top right now, at the top brass. There's a lot of incoming people who are going to get either promoted, or there's just less people in these jobs. And the military is kind of going through this transition in terms of both leadership and kind of how it's being presented by the federal government, and kind of that politicization from within that it was to a lesser and greater extent immune from in the past. For the many crimes of America's military, one thing that you can say about them is that's positive is that they generally don't. You don't hear generals talking about politics, right? You would never see, the chief of the Air Force or the Navy or whatever, make a press release where they're talking about, an upcoming election. It's just not. It would be such a breach that they would be removed from their post. At least prior to this, we don't know what the military is becoming yet under the Trump administration, but the top of it seems to be being molded into something that better reflects the current federal government, which is to say, loyalty to the executive. So all of this is kind of secondary to the efficacy of the force on the ground, right? I can point to all of this waste, I can point to all of this abuse, to this, chaos at the top, and say, well, this is all bad. But if the military remains an effective tool of the federal government, does it matter? Well, kind of the last thing that I want to go over today is some of the issues that are starting to trickle down from the top, that are showing in kind of cracks in that impenetrable armor of the American military. One of those is the Navy. So the Navy honestly might be the most important branch of the American military. It's not the thing that, it's not the boots on the ground that spreads so much wonderful freedom to the Middle East or anything like that. But the Navy is really the engine of the military. You don't get anywhere really without the Navy and everything that the Navy can offer. One of those things being its Air Force, its aircraft carriers, its power projection that can go anywhere in the world. Now, the American Navy is the second largest navy in the world. It was fairly recently, back around 2020, I believe, overtaken by the Chinese Navy. And in terms of raw power, for the short time being, you'd probably still give the advantage to the United States. But America has a real issue in that it can't build ships. It can't build them quickly. It can't repair the ships that it has quickly. And it can't replace aging vessels very quickly. Costs have spiraled out of control. Delays are getting ridiculous. You know, some ships being delayed more than a year. And Trump actually in April gave us a lovely executive order called Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. And in that EO, he kind of says all of this, that the America is falling behind. There's huge issues in terms of refitting ships, of building ships, and they just can't keep up. And in fact, recently, a report on Chinese shipbuilding found that the Chinese shipyards were about 230 times better able to build, and like kind of 230 times larger in terms of what they could do, the ships that they could repair and in a timely fashion as well as build.
This is what happens when you stop investing in white hot cold rolled Pennsylvania steel.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, Josh, think of how much money American capitalists made moving all of those factories over to China in the 70s and 80s. And, if you can no longer compete because you've hollowed out your industrial base and now are struggling against an adversary that is basically the world's manufacturing capital, you got to balance those two. Think about all the money you made.
Yeah, turning America into a service industry. What a glorious idea.
Yeah. And so there's most of the reports are saying that this is a problem that was created over decades. It can only be solved over decades. And that's really not good enough for the American military complex that sees war with China within a couple of years, which is a really concerning thing. I'm just going to digress a little bit here, but the amount of media that has been put out about almost the inevitability of war with China is frankly both appalling and just really disturbing, because shouldn't be anyone's done deal, right? There's and maybe it's just some of the things that I've been reading lately, but there's almost a grim inevitability with a lot of the reporting around this. And I don't know if that's just your average kind of corporate news. I don't know if that's being kind of soft launched, but the idea that you have two global nuclear powers going, preparing for war, and especially if you're selling it or presenting it to people as an inevitability because China wants Taiwan, is not it's honestly just terrifying in that you've come to this kind of conclusion, and it feels like there's agencies kind of working to bring the rest of us along on this conclusion. This should be the absolute last thing that the United States wants, and I'm sure it's if you were to ask the leaders of the CPP, it's the last thing they want as well. So I really don't know where this kind of tone came from, but it seems really pronounced in the last little while of almost this inevitable war between the two of them, because there's no guarantee that America comes out better in this, right? This isn't a country that has had a lot of military success in the last 30, 40 years, right? This is a country that's really good at killing people with bombs, not great at achieving their military goals. They're still, I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but they're still in Iraq. Afghanistan they just lost. Like, they spent 20 years losing that war. And we don't have to go back to Korea and Vietnam. Just stark examples that you cannot necessarily just outspend your opponents.
That was what happened to Russia, was that they tried and they lost.
Yeah, exactly. The Soviet Union
couldn't outspend during the Cold War, and that's what put them down.
Itself trying to keep up with the Americans. And I mean, World War II is a fantastic example of this, right? The countries, the two countries that emerged strongest from the Second World War were the two that had the biggest manufacturing basis. So the Soviet Union had to build most of it kind of during the war, and it suffered incredible, just unthinkable casualties in the Second World War. But it came out of that war as a superpower. By the end of kind of the last year of the war, the Soviets were pumping out more tanks in a month than the Germans had tanks on the Eastern Front in total, right? T-34s. When America emerged from the war, it wasn't that going into it, the United States military was some great power. It really wasn't. But the manufacturing capability of the United States allowed them, and also the fact that there was an ocean between them and
yeah, I was gonna say it's easy to keep the factories running when you're not getting the shit bombed out of you.
Yeah, it's easy to emerge as the global hegemon when everyone else is bombed to hell. But both of those superpowers that ended up defining the later half of the 20th century, they were both manufacturing capitals, right? They both built those industries and trained, they trained the populace on how and on how to build, and they leveraged that into just out building and out competing the Axis forces. America has enjoyed kind of 80 years of dominance on the back of what they built, that post-war order. But that post-war order has been decaying now for probably 50 years. And the rise of nations like China that have a different model, right? They're not liberal democracies. They have a different societal order. And American companies provided them with the funding and the building, and the Chinese were very smart about it. They made deals wherein they gained the technology, right? They always made the Americans partner with Chinese firms, with the Chinese government. And so they very smartly created what China is today, which I think you could probably argue is the second ranked superpower in the world. But at the same time, America has hollowed itself out. This isn't the America that fought World War II. This isn't the young country with, a huge populations willing to work in the factories and churn out supplies for the arsenal of democracy. This is very much, like you said, Josh, a service-based a service-based economy. They don't have what it takes to compete with China, and they know that, which scares me even more because it might mean that we see a war sooner rather than later, because they know that time is not on their side for maintaining the global dominance. And so,
yeah, they kind of pissed away their like top dog spot over the last 50 years, as you said, like kind of with disastrous military campaigns around the world. They've essentially been, stumbling through a revolving door with a tray of soup for 50 years, and it's caught up.
Yeah, yeah. And this isn't even to talk about the fact that the United States is so running such a huge budget deficit at this point. They're going to be adding trillions to the deficit, which is already skyrocketed, past $36 billion or $1 trillion. And all I'm saying with this digression is that it shouldn't be taken for granted that any war that America fights, especially a war against a modern adversary with far greater industrial capacity, would end in America's victory. It should not be taken for granted. And these naval issues kind of illustrate that. And even beyond that, we've seen other examples. The F-35 program has cost over $1.7 trillion, and it's been a bit of a disaster. The aircraft suffered from major technical failures. Countries have kind of cut back their orders on it. It's just not been as good as advertised. The nuclear weapons budget, it needs to balloon because they need to modernize a lot of like their missiles, their delivery systems, and that kind of thing. They're projected to spend $756 billion over the next 10 years on nuclear weapons programs. And then we have the overseas military bases, 750 approximately, in more than 80 countries. Some countries have more than one. Germany, Japan, South Korea host more than one American military base. These, again, just sucks billions and billions of dollars. And none of this is sustainable. None of this is, in the long run, able to be kept up. You're racing against an adversary in China that spends about a third of what, maybe less than a third of what you spend, but is outbuilding you, is outpacing you. What are you getting for this money if you're an American taxpayer? What are you getting for this money if you're an American politician, right? I mean, I hope you have some friends in like Lockheed or something and get you a job after you're
I was going to say, I think it's kickbacks.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe since half the assets are missing at any given time, maybe it's a tank. Maybe you've just got one parked out in the shed. You bomb around on the weekends. I don't know.
I like to think that all the missing assets are in like a Scrooge McDuck vault. And it's just like when everyone, when the whistle blows for the end of the day, and then that's where Pete Hegseth and Trump and all these other friggin' ghouls like get together and strip down, peel off their human skin and swim around in a giant vault of cash like the lizard people they are.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, we're not going to get better than that. I don't have too much more to go through, but I hope this has been kind of a bit of a shock if you haven't been paying attention to kind of the state of the American military. But things aren't going very well. One last little tidbit, and this isn't a government thing. This is more of a societal thing that should give you pause. Is that the Army has a staggering rate of attrition among newly enlisted troops. Nearly a quarter of soldiers now fail to complete their initial military contracts, and they basically drop out. 25% is a massive number, and there's questions now about, well, we if recruiters are still hitting their targets, but if 25% aren't staying for even like 2 years, their initial contracts, is the military able to continue manning its troop levels? Are they able to continue keeping those up? And again, it's just everywhere you look with the military, there are these leaks, right? There's holes. So yeah, it's 1,000 problems with no particular solution, and until someone in government, and it would have to be someone's, it would probably have to be Congress, so good luck, get serious about not just auditing the Department of Defense, because we know that they can't pass an audit. They've had 7 audits in their history. They've failed every single one of them. But actually does a full-on review and looks at how the money's being spent. Imagine if you could find $200 billion of efficiency in the military. The things that you could do with that money. You know what's cheaper than the military? Almost everything you do as the federal government. Extra $200 billion, maybe rehire some of those, weather forecasters so you actually know when hurricanes are coming. There is so much here that is just appalling when you look at it. But clearly, this topic's got my goat a little bit. It's everywhere you look, folks. But yeah, Josh, was there anything that stood out to you with all of this that I've dumped on you? I'm just curious because I feel like the military is it's always such a polarizing topic, especially in the United States, where everything that is the military is also part of the culture. So it's very hard to talk about the military in a criticizing way without coming under a lot of blowback from that.
But yeah, I've known about the overspending of the military for years, and it is such a strange thing about their culture that it's like, for them to have universal health care, they'd only need a little bit of that pie, and they won't give it up. Like, it's because there's often a lot of American conservatives who are like, oh, well, we need to spend less money. We need a conservative in there, so we spend less money. But they always add more to the military budget, and that never seems to be a problem for them. But if that exact same amount of money that was added to the military budget had been added to, like, universal health care, universal college, like, over that exact same amount of money, they'd have all that, and they'd be better positioned to take over the world. Yeah. So
it's not even clear that cutting $200-300 billion from the defense budget is going to adversely affect the efficiency or the lethality of the United States military.
Oh, well, they lose that change in the couches in the Pentagon, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I think we've covered this one pretty well. I will come back to the military subsequently as more things develop, or if Pete gets some more weird ideas. And but I really wanted to kind of give an overview of some of the big issues facing the Department of Defense and the Pentagon in the Trump era. And a lot of these things predate it, but they certainly have been adding their own unique flavor to it as well. So yeah. I was glad we got a chance to talk about this one. And yeah, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform of choice, and tell all your friends. The Politics of New America is hosted by Nathan Stone and produced by Josh Carmody. You can follow us on Blue Sky at Politics New America.
This has been a Haunted Mouse production. Cut that out.